What's up, guys? My name is Nathan. I'm one of the pastors here at 5th through 8th at Christ Chapel, and I'm standing in front of a very rundown building, right? Kind of weird. You're probably wondering where I am. Don't think about that. Right now, I want you to imagine, ready, close your eyes and imagine, a broken down car. The engine isn't working anymore. The paint job is all rusty. It's missing a tire or two, and the leather interior is now like dusty, and there might be spiders living in it. We don't know. It's been sitting in a garage for like 20 years. Now, if someone wanted to restore that car, what would they do? They'd clean it up, right? They'd give it a new paint job, give it a working engine, replace the tires, replace the entire leather interior, and make that old, beat up, broken down car look brand spanking new, right? And it would drive just like it did the first day it came out of the factory. You see, what it means to restore something is to renew it, to renovate it, or put it back in its original state. But the way I want you to think about it is every time you hear me say the word restore or restoration, I want you to just think of the phrase to make new. Now, here's the reason that I'm having you think of a car that slightly resembles Tow Mater from the movie Cars. Things are broken, right? This building is run down, but also this world. Like, you don't need me to tell you that or to feel it or to see it. Like, this world is broken. We ourselves are broken. Some of us might even feel broken down. We desperately need to be made new. This world desperately needs to be restored. But the question you're probably asking right now is, okay, yeah, how? Like, how do we even begin? Well, we are kicking off a 4-week series in the book of Nehemiah. Some people jokingly call it Nehemiah. You can think of that. Yeah, Nehemiah. This book it's awesome, but it's all about the restoration of the walls of Jerusalem. So think of like old beat down walls like this being made new. So without further ado, we're jumping right in to chapter 1, verse 1 of the book of Nehemiah. All right, Nehemiah 1 through 11. What do we see? We see that it starts off with Nehemiah realizing that things aren't how they ought to be, right? The people of Jerusalem are in great trouble and shame. It says that the walls of their city are broken down, and someone thought it was a great idea to set the gates on fire, and those are missing. So the book of Nehemiah begins with Nehemiah realizing that something needs to be done about these broken down walls, right? He needs to restore them. Now, take a second and think back to that old, rusty, beaten up car that's been sitting in the garage for 20 years. If you looked at that thing, you wouldn't even know that it needed to be restored, right? To be made new, if you didn't even know what it was supposed to look like in the first place, right? So that's step 1 in the process of restoration. Discovering that there's an issue, knowing that things aren't how they ought to be. So that's what Nehemiah does, right? He discovers that things ain't right, and then he decides that he's gonna do something that I probably wouldn't do. It says that he sees the city of Jerusalem is in ruin, and he decides to do something about it. Not only that, but he says that he's gonna get the ball rolling by asking God for help, right? He brings in a professional. So that's step 2 in the process of restoration. Again, think back to the old random car. If you're like me, you have no clue how to even begin restoring an old car. Like, I wish I was a mechanic, but sadly, I'm not. I barely even know how to change the oil in my own truck. But you've got to call a professional, someone who knows how to restore that vehicle to its original state. And that's what Nehemiah does. And I think that's crazy because honestly, if I see a big problem, like a city on fire or broken down or like a building like this, I'm gonna be like, yeah, that's somebody else's problem, not mine. And the last thing that I'm gonna think is like, God could fix this, but that's what Nehemiah does. He says, God, you can do this. Now, pause right there. I want you to notice 2 things. The first thing, I'm looking back at the text right here, is that we see Nehemiah discover that something was not how it ought to be, and then he decides he's gonna do something about it. And in short, we see that his affection for the city of Jerusalem and how it's broken down drives him to an action, right? He decides that something needs to be done about it. So if you're a note taker, write this part down. Your affections determine your actions, right? Where your attention and your affections go, your actions are gonna follow. So think about it. If I have a crush on some cutie at school, right? And my affections are all towards this person, I'm gonna do everything I possibly can to be around that person. Or if my affections are slightly misplaced and I'm a Baylor fan, right? Then I'm gonna do everything I can to watch their games, keep up with their stats, rep their gear, and cheer them on their way to a hopeful victory, right? My affections for something determine how I then act. And normally it's for that thing, right? So let's keep going. You've got that down. Now notice how Nehemiah's affections aren't for himself. it says that he's weeping for the city of Jerusalem. He's literally mourning. The man is filled with compassion for the people. He's like fasting and he's praying like something needs to be done about this brokenness that I see around them. Now, stop right there. This whole semester, if you've been with us, and if you're new, then you're hearing it right now, but we've been talking about this idea of being on mission and reflecting Jesus to the world around us. And so this is where I want to start challenging you. I want you to think of what your affections are. Where are your affections? What are you focusing on in life? And how does that influence your actions? Like, how does that influence the way you live? And also, how can you shift your attention towards compassion? How can you begin to be compassionate for, or just simply have affections for things that are outside of yourself? Because if we are ever going to love and obey God and hope to reflect Jesus to the world around us, then we need to reset our affections, right? Because as much as we hate to admit it, they're out of place. Look at what Nehemiah does in verses 4 through 11, right? He acknowledges first the faithfulness and the power of God. He starts setting his eyes and his affections on God. And again, his affections determine his actions, which is really cool. But then he does something that's hard for me to do, and I'm sure hard for you all to do too. He starts to acknowledge his own brokenness and his own sinfulness as a human being, right? So like Nehemiah, guys, here's what I want to say to you. You've got to be brutally honest with yourself. I am a sinner in desperate need of a savior. I am broken. I need to be made new. I need a new heart. My heart might look like that old rusty car. And just be honest with yourself. Like, this is my sin. And guys, that is where Jesus steps into the picture, right? Like, the God of the universe loves you so much that he saw that your heart kind of looked like tow mater, like looked like a rusty, hopeless car that's been sitting in a garage, and he died on a cross, rose again to offer you a new heart. And if you ever hope to reflect Jesus to the world around you, that is the heart that you get in a relationship with Jesus, and that is going to make a difference, right? And so in a relationship with Jesus, you have access to the God of the universe, to the professional, to true restoration, right? And that empowers you to go out and reflect Jesus to the world around you, right? And so the questions that I want to leave you with are this. Are you taking the initiative and relying on God to help you restore the brokenness that you see around you? Kind of like the world and like I'm looking at this building right now and I'm thinking of the world, it's broken. Are you asking God for help to help restore the world around you? And then the other question that I have is, do you have compassion for other people? Because you can't really help other people out if you don't even really care about them in the first place, right? You see, God's master plan is restoration for the entire world, and he's inviting you to be a part of it through a relationship with him. You were made for action and to point others to Christ with your life, and I pray that you do it. You're going to talk about this more in small groups. Have a good time.